In recent presentations, I have focused on the current conditions of the pandemic and our approach to mental health and well-being in our community. In today's presentation, I'd like to return to these topics. First, providing an update on the spread of the pandemic. And I'll then turn to a special aspect of our approach to mental health and well-being, addressing the particular challenges facing our parents and caregivers at this time. We'll close with some reflections by our faculty about mental health and well-being for families. First, the state of the pandemic. The conditions of the pandemic as we head into the holiday season are more serious than they have ever been. I have shared with you previously a few of the indicators that we use to track the pandemic. The number of cases, hospitalizations, and deaths due to COVID-19 are at an all-time high in the United States. We're seeing now more than 200,000 new cases per day. More than 100,000 are currently hospitalized, and there are as many as 2,800 people dying from COVID each day. Uncontrolled spread continues in nearly all 50 states. In our region here in Washington, D.C., we've seen a 44% rise in the District of Columbia over the course of these past 14 days. In Virginia, 21%. In Maryland, 15%. We also track the replication rate across the nation. This is one indicator of the rate of transmission. Rates above 1 indicate the virus is spreading. A number of states have recently fallen below 1, indicating some success in breaking the chain of transmission. I cannot overstate how challenging this moment is and the importance of our deep care and compassion for one another. Our public health guidelines are intended to help break the chain of transmission. Adherence to these guidelines, mask wearing, physical distancing, small gatherings, especially in these upcoming weeks, is critical to preventing further spread of the virus. We are nearing completion of a full semester of virtual learning for our students and for our children and young people across the country. We are entering a season of gathering and celebration. In this time, the layers of protection we have built into our public health program remain as important as ever, wherever you may be. Over these past months, we have sought to be particularly attentive to the challenges facing our families, especially parents and those in caregiver roles. We've created a new special category for paid leave for all employees for COVID-related time off. And we've expanded and launched new initiatives focused on mental health and dependent care support. In late October, at the midpoint of our semester, we announced 3 steps to enhance our support for faculty and staff who, as parents or caregivers, face additional challenges: school closings and virtual learning, disruptions to childcare and elder care services. First, we expanded our GU Cares Dependent Care Fund grants threefold. These grants provided funds to members of our community to address additional expenses incurred because of COVID disruptions related to dependent care. Second, our Department of Human Resources appointed a dependent care coordinator to establish a central place for faculty and staff to reach out to with questions. Third, we set up a new standing body organized by our Office of the Chief Operating Officer and the Faculty Senate, our faculty governance body, to allow for continued input on dependent care support and resources provided by the university. For our students, we have maintained a comprehensive list of resources for mental health and well-being. Throughout the semester, we have hosted events and gatherings to encourage community building, meditation, and exercise. Throughout the pandemic, students have had access to telehealth services through CAPS, our Counseling and Psychiatric Service Program. And we're working to expand the options for telehealth services for students in January. As I recently shared with you, we are also expanding our partnership with One Medical to provide therapy, coaching, and wellness opportunities at no cost for Georgetown faculty and staff. This complements our current faculty and staff assistance program and the assistance provided through our health plans. I'd now like to share a brief clip with you of one of our faculty members, Professor Adi Haramati of our medical center, who pioneered bringing wellness into the medical education curriculum. In this clip, he talks about how stress affects the body, and he has some initial ideas for how to manage stress during this challenging time.
So the way the body responds to stress is one of the most amazing mechanisms. It's a way in which we can deal with threats to our system. So as we have various stressors that impinge on us, it could be psychological stress, it could be physical stress, it could be emotional stress. The first thing that happens is the brain begins to perceive that and makes an appraisal. Is this a threat to me or not? And within milliseconds, if the decision is yes, this is a threat, then parts of the brain send the signal to the pituitary gland to release a hormone, which then affects the adrenal gland and releases cortisol, a hormone that many are familiar with. And at the same time, the brain also activates the sympathetic nervous system. So heart rate goes up and blood pressure goes up and blood flow to our skeletal muscles goes up. And we have what's known as the flight or fight response, where we're able to deal with the threat. And this is a good thing, not a bad thing. And so then the threat is dealt with and things come back to normal. And in fact, the system is designed to turn itself off when the threat has gone away. Well, what happens if you have a situation where you have one stressor on top of another stressor on top of another stressor? And think about everything that we're dealing with now. We're dealing with concern about our teaching and our research and our loved ones and what's going to happen to the community. And these stressors come very fast. There's no time for that relaxation recovery mode. And so what happens, we end up with very high stress hormone levels, both adrenaline and norepinephrine and cortisol. And what that does is, initially, that's helpful, but in the long term, that becomes deleterious, and that begins to make us sick.
Can you talk about some of the strategies that we can use to reduce stress and its impact on us?
Right. So this is the key, is that if we're at a very high state now of alertness and our stress hormones are very high and it's impairing our ability to respond, the question is, how do we improve it? What can we do? I'm going to give 4 suggestions. There are many things that we could do. I'm going to give 4 and invite people to select one of those or 2 of those. The first is this. The most important thing that we could do to improve our ability to respond to stress and to reduce our stress is to get adequate sleep. Good sleep hygiene is essential because that's how the body repairs itself and begins to renew and actually boost the immune system, ability to defend ourselves. And so that's the first thing, is really to get good, adequate sleep. And part of that means stepping away from distractors, putting away the phone earlier as you begin to prepare for sleep. The second is to get very good nutrition. We're in a position now, many of us are at home, where we can cook more and eat out less. And so the ability to eat good, healthy, nutritious meals has never been easier in many ways. The third is to set aside time for exercise. And exercise doesn't mean I have to go to the gym for an hour. A 30-minute walk outside is perfectly good exercise that can improve our stress levels. And fourthly, I would invite people to adopt a stress-reducing strategy. It could be a simple breathing exercise, or it could be listening to music, or it could be sitting outside and just contemplating oneself, but enjoying outdoors. These are all very easy and common stress-reducing tools.
Thank you. Thank you. This conversation was part of our daily conversation series, Georgetown Now, which invites members of our community to share their knowledge and expertise. It provides a way for all of us to stay connected and learn about the work of our colleagues. Over the course of the past 2 semesters, I've talked with a number of our faculty experts about their insights on the mental health of young people. As we approach the holiday season, I'd like to share 2 additional clips with you from my conversations with Professor Matt Beal of our Medical Center and Professor Jennifer Woolard of our Department of Psychology. Each describes important elements of how we think about our own mental health and the mental health of those around us, especially children and young people.
The point that I tend to begin and end with parents is that our kids are going to do exactly as well as we do as parents in navigating this. If we as parents or as other adults in kids' lives can manage to be flexible, to be adaptive, to keep our calm under pressure, to take care of ourselves and our own well-being, and to do whatever we need to do to take care of ourselves and one another and our relationships, our kids are going to navigate this just fine. They are taking all of their leads about this from us. They're taking their leads about whether this is something that is endurable or not, whether this is something that overwhelms our resources or is something that we can pull together and navigate. And so I think the most critical thing is for adults to focus on self-care and focus on what do they need to do to make it through the stressors that we're all facing. Those are different for many families. For the work that we're doing with the Early Childhood Innovation Network in some of the most under-resourced parts of the nation's capital, a lot of what we're doing is working with families to figure out how do we get them connected with the resources that they need. How do they maintain good nutrition during this period? How do they get connected to social services that may be helpful or necessary? How do they think about a homeschool scenario in which they may have limited access to technology, where the digital divide comes into play? And then how can we use things like telehealth to support parent well-being as well as teacher well-being during this massive interruption? And then I think the second part is just talking to kids in a way that we all know our kids. We know their personalities and their temperaments, as well as their age and their developmental stage, and finding ways to talk to kids about what's going on in a way that is suited for that child. I mean, I was talking to a parent recently who had a 3-year-old and a 13-year-old at home. And for the 3-year-old, it's just enough to say, mommy's working at home today.
Right.
The 3-year-old doesn't need more context than that. The 13-year-old needs a heck of a lot more context than that. So they're 2 very, very different conversations.
Professor Woolard shared her reflections about how we have brought academic knowledge into our safety net at Georgetown, focusing on prevention and proactive work with students.
In one way, from my community psychology background, I emphasize the importance of prevention, right? So trying to bring the academic knowledge to bear on the realities of our students' lives and to think about ways that we can try to prevent incidents from happening, creating a context in which they're less likely to occur, right, and so forth. So we certainly have some intervention programs on the Georgetown campus for our students that they engage in. But I'm encouraged at how our community is thinking about how we can do more and do differently, and to bring the students' voices in as equal partners to figuring out how to do that.
Later this week, our entire community is welcomed to gather for our annual Christmas tree lighting. This is a very special tradition for us. It marks the end of our fall term and invites us to reflect on our membership in this very special community. This year, we'll gather virtually. We'll share Christmas carols and enjoy a performance of Charles Dickens' classic story, A Christmas Carol, performed by our Mask and Bauble Dramatic Society and the Georgetown Theater Alliance. We have a number of activities on our website for celebrations throughout the holiday season. I hope you'll join us on Wednesday evening for this special tradition. As we approach the end of the fall semester and the beginning of the exam period, I wish each of you the very best. I'm deeply grateful to our entire community for all that you were able to accomplish together and all of the ways you supported one another throughout this semester. Take care of yourselves and take care of everyone around you. For every Hoya, everywhere.